South African President Jacob Zuma survives a secret ballot of no confidence. The results show some disloyalty within his ANC party. Incumbent Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has taken an early lead in the polls against his rival Raila Odinga, with 55% of the vote after two-thirds of polling stations reported their results. And at least 5 dead and dozens injured in Sichuan province in China after an earthquake measuring 6.5 in magnitude struck this Tuesday. We'll be speaking to our reporter on the ground. Hello and welcome to France 24. I'm Catherine Clifford. He's clung on to the top job. South African President Jacob Zuma survived the 8th vote of no confidence in his career this Tuesday. Following a secret ballot in Parliament, ANC party members celebrated after Zuma won 198 votes to the opposition's 177. Radaba Abbas reports.
He may be due to step down as president within 2 years, but after surviving a vote of no confidence, it seems Jacob Zuma is not going anywhere for the time being. The secret parliamentary ballot followed 6 previous attempts to unseat the South African leader. Opposition parties had hoped the vote would encourage disgruntled ANC party legislators who face numerous graft allegations to vote against Zuma. The Democratic Alliance leader said the dozens who supported the no-confidence motion proved that the president had lost the mandate of his party.
The issue today for all of us is that South Africa must look at this result as a positive result, as a moment in our nation where across parties, the right thing, people felt they must vote for change. And even though Jacob Zuma may have just survived this motion, the journey towards 2019 has just begun.
Meanwhile, Zuma's supporters gathered outside Parliament to celebrate the result. The ANC's chief whip said he was happy that the motion of removing the government had failed.
This motion of removing our government and our president has been defeated. This is what we were saying to people of South Africa, that we will not, with our eyes open, vote as ANC members of Parliament with the opposition to remove our government.
Jacob Zuma faces a series of corruption allegations which led to his party members calling on him to step aside. He's expected to be replaced as party leader when the ANC meets in December.
The secret no-confidence ballot has, however, revealed some disloyalty among President Zuma's ANC party MPs. The results showed at least 26 ANC MPs rebelled, while another 9 MPs abstained. France 24's Aisha Ismail filled us in on the party politics at play.
Congress has always said that while there are serious divisions and deep divisions within the party, they have said that they will deal with Jacob Zuma in a manner in which they deem fit. They've said they will decide if and when and how Jacob Zuma should be removed. And they're saying that this will be decided at their elective conference, which will take place in December this year. They said they would not allow the opposition party to dictate to the ANC how and when to deal with Jacob Zuma.
Now to Kenya, where incumbent President Uhuru Kenyatta has taken an early lead against his rival Raila Odinga, with 55% of the vote after two-thirds of polling stations reported their results. Despite fears of violence of the likes that occurred during elections a decade ago, the vote has so far gone ahead peacefully. Some polling stations stayed open late due to overcrowding and bad weather. France 24's correspondent Julia Steers was at one of them.
Here at this polling station in Nairobi, they've finished counting the presidential ballots and have moved on to the other races. Now, voting wrapped up here about 2 hours later than the polls were meant to close, and that was largely due to the big crowds that turned out to vote today. For the most part, things in Nairobi went smoothly. There were some small skirmishes at polling stations and some delays that were due to the failure of biometric technology to ID voters, but the Electoral Commission said that this was dealt with swiftly. Now, outside of Nairobi in northern Kenya, there were longer delays of up to 10 hours, and this was due in some regions to heavy rains, and in others to insecurity. So voters are still at the polls there. They're expected to continue to vote overnight, and their votes will be tallied tomorrow morning. The Electoral Commission has said they are still hopeful, however, that they will be able to announce a winner in the next 1 to 2 days. Now, technically, they have 7 days to declare a presidential winner, but given Kenya's history of post-election violence, particularly when there is a lag in announcing the winner, there's a lot of pressure within the country and from the international community to announce a winner as soon as possible.
President Uhuru Kenyatta is hoping for a second term in office, and opposition veteran Raila Odinga is on his fourth bid for the presidency. Both men's campaigns have focused on calming tribal tensions, though Odinga has faced criticism for calling on his supporters to take matters into their own hands in the event of vote rigging. Nicholas Jarman tells us more about the two rivals.
After independence, Kenya's first president was Jomo Kenyatta. The first vice president was Oginga Odinga. More than 5 decades later, the two favourites in this poll are their two sons, Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Kenyatta, who's 55, was elected in 2013 despite being indicted by the International Criminal Court. He was accused of orchestrating post-election violence in 2007 that left more than 1,100 people dead. But in 2014, the ICC dropped the charges, citing the disappearance of witnesses and lack of evidence. This week, he urged Kenyans to remain calm.
No matter the result of this election, we must stand together as one people. Above all, we must reject intimidation. We must reject violence or any attempt to divide us.
During his tenure, Kenya has experienced steady growth, but his critics say he failed to tackle corruption and the country was hit by several major jihadist attacks. His main rival, Raila Odinga, who's 72, came second in the 2013 election. Before the poll, he said he feared the authorities would try to prevent him from winning.
Attempt to try to use the security forces to intimidate voters. All this is aimed at suppressing turnout in our strongholds.
Odinga has been in politics for decades. In 1982, he supported a coup attempt. For that, he spent 9 years in jail. The charismatic leader became prime minister in 2008. This is his fourth attempt at the presidency. Many voters are expected to cast their ballot along ethnic lines. Odinga's ethnic group, the Luo, is the second largest in Kenya, but has yet to produce a head of state.
Streets were unusually quiet across Kinshasa this Tuesday after the Congolese opposition called for a 2-day general strike in a bid to pressure President Joseph Kabila to set an election date. He so far refused to stand aside after his mandate expired in December. The movement, dubbed Dead City, comes a day after 12 people were shot dead during anti-government violence in the capital. Emerald Maxwell has more.
These streets are usually teeming with people. Instead, there's little traffic and many shops are closed. The Congolese opposition has called for 2 days of nationwide strikes, the aim being to paralyse the economy and force Joseph Kabila to step down before the end of the year. In the streets of the capital, there are mixed feelings.
I agree with the general strike because I want the authorities to know that we don't want them anymore. We want change.
The opposition is saying don't go out, but most people are challenging that. It's a real mess. I don't like it.
I think the people leading this action are louts. It's nothing to do with us. We're still going to work.
The strikes come a day after deadly clashes in Kinshasa between police and members of the separatist BDK sect. Some of Joseph Kabila's allies are calling for a state of emergency. Tension has mounted since he refused to step down in December, with a wave of attacks and mass jailbreaks in recent months. Fearing further unrest, Congolese authorities have ordered internet capacity be slowed down so that people can't send pictures via social media.
US President Donald Trump has hit back at North Korea with a fiery threat, as Japanese and US media reported that the country may now have successfully produced a miniaturized nuclear warhead. This after Pyongyang issued its own colourful warning to Washington, vowing to make the US pay 1,000 times over for new UN sanctions. Let's take a listen to Trump's response.
beyond a normal. North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly, power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
And now to China, where at least 5 people are dead and dozens injured after an earthquake measuring 6.5 in magnitude struck a southwest province this Tuesday. The remote and mountainous Sichuan province is popular with holidaymakers and prone to earthquakes. Local authorities said 100 tourists have been trapped by landslides. I'm now joined live on the line from Beijing by Paul James, who's following the story for us. Paul, what's the latest on the ground?
Well, as it stands now, the death toll has been upgraded to 7, with at least 88 others injured. Though these numbers are very fluid, as you may expect, details are still sort of rolling in. The quake came around 10 hours ago, around 9 p.m., just shortly after 9 p.m. Local time, in an area in the northern part of Sichuan, and an area known as Zhoujai, which is a very popular tourist area, known for its waterfalls and karst valleys. Officials saying that at least 5 of the dead are known to be tourists. As far as the magnitude of the earthquake itself, the U.S. Geological Survey putting it at a 6.5. The China Earthquake Network Center, which usually estimates earthquakes at a little bit of a higher, saying that it hit it at a 7, but it's striking a very shallow depth of less than 10 kilometers, which of course accentuates the shaking. Now, this area is known to have earthquakes. However, this one in particular is fairly strong in so much as it's in an area where it's not overly populated, but in an area where it's very popular with tourists. So given that it's all at the end of summer and toward the high end of the tourist area, the casualty numbers are going to remain quite fluid, as I mentioned. But authorities are moving in, trying to get emergency crews in as quickly as possible. Difficulty, though, is that it's a relatively remote area. It's high level. It's at the edge of the Tibetan Plateau, of heights of some 4,000 meters. So that in itself is going to create some challenges as rescue workers try to move themselves in.
Thank you very much, Paul James, for that update from Beijing. And a group of 17 nations in the Americas have called on Venezuela to scrap its new constituent assembly and free political prisoners. This after the new assembly passed a decree declaring itself superior to all other branches of government this Tuesday, allowing the pro-government body to bypass the opposition-controlled National Assembly. President Maduro describes the Constituent Assembly as the country's only hope in restoring peace and stability, while the opposition call it a power grab. And staying in Venezuela, the UN says it has evidence that protesters there are being subjected to widespread and systematic use of excessive force. The report details numerous examples of human rights violations, including violent house raids, arbitrary detentions and torture. It's calling on Nicolas Maduro's government to rein in security forces and investigate alleged abuses. Catherine Viette has more.
The United Nations is sounding the alarm over human rights violations in Venezuela. As the country's political and economic crisis worsens, the UN says protesters are being subjected to deadly force.
Several thousand people have been arbitrarily detained, many reportedly subjected to ill treatment and even torture, while several hundred have been brought before military rather than civilian courts. These patterns show no signs of abating.
According to the UN, government security forces are allegedly responsible for at least 46 deaths during the months-long protests. Pro-government armed groups are believed to be responsible for another 27 deaths. Witnesses told UN investigators that the government forces had fired tear gas and buckshot at protesters without warning. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has called on the Venezuelan government to stop using excessive force against the demonstrators and release those who have been arbitrarily detained.
Stay tuned to France 24.